Hello, hope everyone had a good fall break. Welcome to our non-traditional day of class. We'll return to normal next week. In the meantime, I've posted recordings to a couple short videos talking about multivariate regression. So we're gonna add dimensions to our life, to our skill set, as we go from simple regression, bivariate regression, one x variable, one y variable, to multivariate regression where we have multiple x variables. So I think in terms of a vector of x variables, but you can think of x1, x2, x3. If you have three different explanatory variables, you can use that to better predict what's going to happen with your outcome, with your y variable, than if you only had one of those, x1. So multivariate regression allows us to make better predictions if we're looking at predicted models. It also allows us to get a more refined view of the relationship we're looking at between, say, x1 and y. If we look at a simple correlation, that's what we do when we look at x and y with just one x variable. We're looking at a relationship between two variables, and like a correlation, there really isn't a lot we can say about why that relationship exists between x and y. If it's a positive or negative relationship, if there is no relationship, it's hard to know what's going on under the hood. Once we start moving to multivariate regression, we're able to get a better understanding of the relationship between x1 and y. Why? In what way are we better able to understand that relationship? Well, by including x2 and x3, for example, in a regression, it would mean that we're accounting for their relationship with y, and we're able to set aside their effect on what's going on with our outcome. We call that controlling for those variables. So with a multivariate regression, we're able to control for things that we know matter or that we think may matter. It allows us to focus on a more specific relationship. We call it a conditional correlation between x1 and y, setting aside the effect of being male versus female, setting aside the effect of race, setting aside the effect of being older versus younger. Here's the relationship between being a marketing major and having a particular grade in a class, or if we want to focus on quantitative variables, which is what we've been doing, we could look at the relationship between how long you've lived in your current residence, measured in months, as an explanatory variable, and we can use your grade on test 1 as an outcome variable. Well, the relationship that we're looking for, the hypothesis we're setting up, is that we think we may be able to better understand how you did on test 1 if we know how long you've lived in your current residence. Is that a good hypothesis? I don't know. We can test it though, right? And by using a multivariate regression as our setup, we can control for other things and focus on the more specific relationship between how long you've lived where you live and the score you got on test 1. And so that ends up being a really powerful tool, both for predictive models, but also for research purposes to better understand relationships that we might care about. It also gets us closer in some ways to that elusive causal relationship that we're often hunting for at root. Remember the question of, how would my life look different if I had stayed on the farm and become a farmer? And I said, we're never going to know exactly because it's a counterfactual that didn't exist. But if we start controlling for more things that we think may matter, we can get more precise on the relationship that we're testing with our hypothesis. And so this is how we start kind of pulling apart the different threads that make up a rope and tugging on them and seeing which ones seem to matter, which ones hold weight, which ones don't seem to matter. So, like I said, a couple short-ish videos about multivariate regression, and there'll be a few pretty straightforward questions, multiple choice questions, asking you about those. Hope you enjoy this alternative method of instruction this week, and we'll be back to normal next week. Thanks, guys.